know about you, Fit, but I might like the morning sessions a little bit better than the evening sessions. We'll check it out for
Yeah,
this and see how it goes. You know what I mean?
it's a different energy. It's a whole different thing when you're
Yeah.
coming in the early AMs.
Yep, that's right. The
Yeah.
morning. My grandpa used to say, the early bird gets the worm, and you got to get up before the cows get a hold of the air.
Mm.
So we live out in the country where we used to live out in the country, and so um, there's obviously a cow smell, and he would say, "You got to get out and beat the cows up." Um, so yeah, so the early bird gets the worm. Well, let's get after it. Hey, so we knocked out a month last week. That was the end of our month, and we were able to go into a private session mode to really help people on breaking cycles and giving them some goods for that. Um, and this month we're going to work really through the idea of resentment and trying to get to a better space with that. Resentment's kind of interesting how it happens. Um, but I think that there's different ways that, it kinda gets started, and it's really is, like, relationship-wise, kind of a silent killer, because the hard
Mm.
thing is it's not really like, it's not something where somebody even knows that it's growing. Like, nobody's like, "Oh, let me cultivate some resentment." Usually there's a mixture of things going on they start creating resentment, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But yeah, I think it's such an important topic for us to be able to discover and talk about today.
Yeah, definitely. Because that resentment, it speaks volumes, even though it's silent, even though it can be silent, it
Mhm.
speaks volumes. And
Yeah,
it's like how it grows is like we continue to grow it. As I like to say, where the attention goes, the energy flows. And it's we can just keep talking to ourselves. You see that person driving on the way home from work. Their boss was telling them this, and they're all telling them still, talking to themselves, telling themselves a story, and meanwhile the resentment continues to grow, and you know, over
yeah,
time, if unchecked.
yeah. I know in my own personal life, like um, one of the things that I've done in relationship, prior to my current, I think it helped really grow me to acknowledge this is like something would happen in the relationship and I wouldn't express it and I would act like things were okay. And instead, I was building messages that allowed me to reduce the person who I'm supposed to be loving,
Yeah,
right? And so now I'm holding this unchecked box or these resolved boxes of things and weights, and those same kind of like weights or bricks start building something around the heart to a point where the heart is surrounded by stone, and you can't be loved and you won't love, and the relationship ultimately for me like ended up in a cold space, and it didn't
yeah,
have to be that way. In part, I know there's always two people, it takes two people to tangle, but in part I always feel like that was a huge responsibility that I did not um, pick up and take on myself to be able um, to not allow myself to build resentment. And I think in this month, because of what I've learned and what I know, and then how I'm able to help couples now, it's so important for us to be able to share. Okay, so then how do we do that differently? How do we know that it's there? How do we do it differently? And try to work through things that are actually going to benefit the people who we're loving on this month. Yeah, so we do have a little bit in our listener connection section. I want to read this concept, which is I don't like to speak up because I don't want to cause conflict, but then I feel distant from my partner.
mhm,
So I feel like that's when I'm talking about myself in the past, that might be something similar to the same concept. Like I don't like to speak up because I don't want to cause conflict, right? And a lot of times it's just that fear that ends up happening. Um, do you watch that happen in your work that you do, Fit?
all the time. I see
Mhm.
it all the time. It happens everywhere. We just don't
Yeah,
even notice it, but if we really pay attention to it, it happens so much. And it's that fear that causes that barrier. It's that fear that creates that idea
Yeah.
where no, it's better to not say anything.
Mhm.
But also that fear is traced back to that belief where it's better to not say anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
So much of our especially when it's connected to resentment, you guys, like so much of it is based on what our body knows and less about what our mind's thinking. So our body knows something like fear, like it gets an experience or thinks that it's going to know an experience and it starts interacting. And that's a really huge thing. It does it in
yeah,
sneaky ways. But one of these things is like, and we talked about avoidance last month, but one of these things is like not to get into conflict, right? So if I've watched all my life people fighting, I'm going to try to not make a big deal out of little things, right? And in that, meanwhile, I'm taking jabs, jabs, jabs. And over a period of time, we talked about you boxing last week. uh, over a certain amount of time, as that goes on, those jabs start wearing on you,
yeah,
right? And so then it starts creating something else. And so um, the distance happens because in order for us to do this, right, to protect ourselves from those jabs that keep coming on, even if we don't want to make this a big deal, you have to start growing that the stone that I talked about earlier around your heart. And so if you start growing that stone around your heart, what's going to happen is you won't be able to get close and connected. And that's when people start to feel alone or the distance inside of their relationship. And so for our listener here who is talking about this idea of like I don't want to cause conflict, um, conflict is actually the place of growth together. It's weird how it happens, but all good things have to go through um, some kind of mess or rototilling like you would in the dirt basically. It has to go through some kind of rototilling to really grow into what it is. I mean, any seed has to go through a break and like a transformation in the dark and the wet and the nasty before it actually can poke up and become something, right? And so in our relationships, if we're avoiding conflict, we're also avoiding the possibility of growing together and connecting, right? And there are ways to do the conflict that probably are really important for us to discuss later. But the most important thing is the thought process has to be different if we're going to grow something that means connection versus the distance. And I think that's really important for that listener to be able to have that concept.
mhm. You know what I noticed about avoidance? A lot of people who avoid have a lot of insecurities or lack self-esteem or confidence in certain things, right?
Mhm.
And so, if you want to, a great way to, if you want to boost your self-esteem and confidence, start to speak on issues,
Mhm.
uncomfortable issues. Start to address the issues and get used to speaking up on the uncomfortable things that usually people don't say because they want to avoid that conflict because it's easier because there's
Right.
no fear there involved. Even the
Mhm.
thought of saying something and what are they going to say, think, and so that's one thing. If you really want to boost your self-esteem and elevate your confidence, learn to speak on issues, more often and get comfortable with it. That really does elevate your confidence as well and being able to address those tough situations, and especially with your partner. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think, one of the models that I built the Shine Campus after, like what made me think about it in my mind was like, um, the best thing about education is not like just teaching somebody and then somebody learning it. I think education more like the gym model is useful. And so that repetition of being able to go through something difficult constantly, meaning like I'm going to put myself out there whether no matter what the result is. And I just need to practice being able to have a habit of putting myself out there. It's such a
Yeah.
useful for everybody trying to build themselves. It's a useful thing when you can get intentional about what it is that you're trying to grow and what it is you're trying to build, and then you start working at it, and you're going to notice like how much of a person you become, um, that's capable of doing things that are beneficial to your own life, right? So I think that's a huge idea. And as we're talking about being able to do something different and grow that confidence factor, we can get into our next segment, which is okay, so how do I break the patterns that have actually got me into a place of growing resentment in my heart, right? How do I break those patterns? Well, um, what we do know is that, and I'm going to explain resentment this way before we go into it, because I think knowing is one way for us to start getting to breaking the patterns. And then let's ask a couple of questions that I think will help tease out some of it too. So for me, resentment is, this is a useful definition. Resentment is a result, one of the results, because there are actually four results. One of the results of us not either knowing how to or appropriately expressing anger. Now, the thing about anger is anger has derivatives. The smallest, and everybody will define this differently depending on their vocabulary and what they know about the world around them. The smallest amount of anger, and as far as intensity goes, is something like irritated or bothered. The highest and most intense form of anger is something like hate or rage, right? So depending on, again, your definitions, that could all change for everybody. Okay. Now, what's important is that anger has a column of derivatives. And when we don't express that column of derivatives, it jumps to a third column that has four situations. One is getting out, one is anxiety, one is depression, and one is resentment. So we're on the resentment one today, right? So what we know that resentment comes from is not being able to express anger. And that goes with what we've already started explaining, is that um, there's little things that might happen that bother us or irritate us and we don't express it. Or maybe we express it, but we're blaming when we do it. Or maybe we express it and we miss actually what it was coming from, because before the anger column, there are things that actually um, kick into anger, definitions and the way we think about things that really matter, like shoulds, I should, you should, we should, hurts. Like there are different kinds of ideas that help us get to the anger factor, right? So we might actually miss how we got to the anger, and even that would cause us to jump into the third column, which is resentment, depression, anxiety, getting out. All right. So now, resentment being the factor, us knowing that, hey, you know what, that comes from an unexpressed anger. That gives us a huge opportunity to be able to start looking at, okay, how would I shift this pattern? How would I shift this pattern? So the first question that we'll ask is, why do people actually avoid sharing their needs? What would you say to that, Fit?
Because it can be embarrassing. A lot of the times, sharing a need can be embarrassing. That's one. But you want to talk about resentment, there's that you should already know.
Mhm.
You should already be, I shouldn't have to say anything.
Expectations. That's right.
That's when that's when the resentment will start to kick in. And then we start to feel like we already told them, but going back and saying, well, how did I tell them? How did I tell them? Did I
Mhm.
tell them directly? Did I tell them in my way where I'm assuming they should just understand? Was I clear enough?
Yeah.
Right. But then again, those stories that we create in our minds, whether, and it's interesting because we're creating the story in our minds, and sometimes that story is created in a second,
Mhm.
but usually that story was there before they met the person,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the when if a partner says, "You never listen to me,"
Mhm.
but here's the thing: majority of the time, the "you" was there before they met.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Resentment.
interesting. Yeah. So here's the thing is, and I agree with all that you said, Fit. And I'm going to tell people an additional, why do people avoid sharing their needs? You don't share your needs because your vision is too small for your relationship. When you think from what you want at the end of your relationship versus what's happening to you right now, everything changes. So the reason that you avoid sharing your needs is because your vision is not connected to what you want to grow in your relationship. When
Mhm.
you think from the end in mind, everything changes. So that's actually a clue into like how I'm accidentally building resentment, right? Because I'm so focused on what's going on now instead of what I'm trying to build. A shift over in our vision and what we're thinking and where we're headed changes everything. So then we let those things that you just described fit. That's why I'm saying that they're legit. These two things go together. Then we let those things get in our way because our vision about what we actually want is too small. It's too small. It's just about right now. It's about what we've been through in the past. It's about all the things that have already gone on or that might go on. And we have it's zero connected to like, look, I want to build an amazing relationship with my partner. And I need to know in this moment, what do I got to do? So when we ask that question, everything changes. Well, I'm not going to sit here with unmarked things, and I'm not going to blame at the same time. So I'm going to go into the situation and I'm going to start battling myself to really do it different. Right. So the issue is when people are avoiding sharing their needs, it's because their vision is too small. And if you want to tackle it, you have to shift your vision and start looking somewhere else. Because when you start looking somewhere else, it creates a whole difference in how you feel and the way that you move. Okay. The next question is, how does silence make wounds grow deeper? And I'll go first on this. Um, there's an old saying that says closed mouths don't get fed.
Mhm.
Right? But here's the other thing about that is nobody else is really responsible for making you making you better. But I think whenever we're silent, it's not that we're just silent on the outside. We're actually closing off ourselves to the ability to express and know what's going on with us. Right.
Mhm.
So my belief about that person or this situation where somebody's like, um, I'm going to be silent about what's going on. I feel like in that place, and we talked about codependency before, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit right here. Silence allows abusive scenarios to continue. Abusive or hurtful scenarios cannot continue if I'm willing to say something.
Mm.
So if I'm going to grow as a person, if I'm going to get better, if I'm going to get to a different place, if I'm going to glow up, if I'm going to shine, if everybody's going to be able to see me, I'm going to have to talk. Well, if I learn how to shut down, then the scenarios actually kind of keep growing and get bigger and nobody can see me at that point in time, right? And in our relationships, the the codependency is victim, perpetrator, rescuer. And as long as I be quiet, I just stay in the cycle. I'm either becoming one of those things or I jump out to not participate. But if my silence won't allow me to jump out, my silence just allows me to stay in the cycle of codependency, right? So that and what does it do? So any kind of hurt that I've already had, it just doubles down on that because all abuse has the link of codependency in it, victim, perpetrator, rescuer. It doesn't matter if you're abusing alcohol or you're abusing other people, right? So no matter what, it always has that element inside of there. So uh, the silence allows our wounds to get deeper because it doubles down on what's going on. As soon as we start talking, as soon as you start talking, you can even talk to yourself. As soon as you start talking, everything there is no abuse that can happen with silence without whenever silence starts getting cut out. Right? There isn't. It just can't happen. Right? At that point in time, it's like, ooh, too loud of a person. Abuse runs away. Right? And so now I think that the more that we are able to um, say out loud what's going on and we're not able to say it silent, just on our own, our wounds start to heal and get to a different place.
Yeah, yeah. You know what also is just makes those wounds just cut even deeper is the when there is issues in the relationship and they're not being spoken about, they're not being addressed, they're just being swept under the rug.
Mhm,
And over time of, hey, these things happen. We need to talk about them. I says, no, we don't. It happened already, it's over. Right. Those things continue to happen in the relationship. We don't go back and continue to address those things each and every time. And again, that story continues to grow in our mind. And
mhm,
then and we know that, forgiveness is key, but then we even, don't want to forgive at that point. And
mhm,
here's the thing about resentment is a lot of people do not want to forgive because they think that if I forgive, that means that what you did was okay.
mhm,
If I forgive you, you're going to do it again,
mhm,
right? Or Well, you haven't earned my forgiveness yet. So there's a checklist here. There's a schedule, a time frame for when I can forgive you and how much you've done to earn that forgiveness. And then I will forgive you. But meanwhile, during that time, maybe that resentment's still there from the lack of the need at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so then again, just even deeper and deeper and deeper for both
Yeah.
people at that point.
Yeah. So our final question is about like when we've seen it go unchecked, and I started describing earlier, about the resentment that I built in relationships. Um, but I will also say that like the one thing, you guys, that happens whenever we grow or we allow the resentment to grow unchecked is we start doing these punishment things. And if it this, what reminded me of this is what you were just discussing. Um, and so we start doing these punishment things where we try to do sneaky punishments um, to somehow get that sense of control back. These are not. We talk about the psychology of what goes on with us, and less about like, hey, this is how you do this and this is how you do that type scenario. There's really a psychology to what's going on that a lot of times we're just not paying attention to. And if we did, everything would shift for us. So in this case, like the idea of punishment becomes a real thing. And not everybody likes that I say this, especially when they don't know me yet. But look at the scenario. You're accidentally, so let's say you go, um, somebody hurts you and you go silent treatment. And you keep doing this, and this is ultimately the resentment factor. That's how it builds, right? What is silent treatment ultimately? Ultimately, silent treatment is a form of punishment. You're attempting to punish, right?
Withdrawal.
Regardless of what it ends up being, right? So you're trying to remove one of the more valuable human opportunities, which is connection, right? So you know that inherently before I even say that. So you're doing that, and the goal there is punishment. So resentment ends up taking you to a place of punishment, which as people, that's not our role to be able to punish each other. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but that's not our role, right? Our role that makes us actually fulfill ourselves is to create, connect, and contribute to each other. It's not punish. So we end up with resentment and on the wrong track of doing life. Right? And so the more that we end up in resentment, the unchecked resentment ends in you trying to punish. And you'll do that in all kinds of sneaky ways, whether it's silence, whether it's leave, whether it's leave the relationship, whether it's step out on the relationship, whether it's do less in the relationship, like whatever it is, you'll punish in all kinds of ways. And you'll literally say, I'm not doing anything, right? Yeah, you're not doing anything. That's part of the problem, but if we started doing something like being able to express what's going on just even to ourselves of like, hey, this is really hurting me, this is what's going on, that is a huge starting spot just to be able to talk and start getting to a different place. You have anything to add to that, Fit?
Yeah. Well, I have something to add. I got a question over here.
Okay. I
Hmm.
love
I got a
it.
question over here. Yeah. Cool Beans is asking, thank you, Cool Beans, for the question. He's asking, what happens when you say something, but the abuse continues and leaving isn't an option? And for me, I'm wondering, why isn't it an option? And I understand a lot of the time the family dynamic, or perhaps, hey, we're living out here. We moved out here to this far place away from my family, and I don't have any family out here, and a lot of those things. But again, what happens when you say something, but the abuse continues and leaving isn't an option?
Mhm. So first of all, I would contend with the leaving isn't an option, kind of like you were asking, and maybe there does need to be more context. That's not an argument. I just know that like we always have free choice, and we can do what it is um, that we need to do. And I want people to stay safe. Okay, um, so leaving is an option. And then if we rewind back on what if the abuse continues, I won't necessarily answer that question because I think leaving is an option. But what I will say is abuse takes a triangle. So somebody can be abusive without being able to abuse. Like I can walk down the street and somebody can call me a name That's abusive, but I don't feel abused, right? And if we're talking about physical, like we don't need to be in that situation. If we're talking about mental, emotional, then we need to understand the difference between being abused and somebody being abusive. Because whenever we jump out of that triangle, meaning like victim, perpetrator, rescuer, when we jump out of that triangle, there is no more abuse. And there is a possibility that we haven't solidified our ability to jump out of those roles. And this is not a mark on anybody, and I think that's really important. Like, for people who don't know me or not familiar, like, my ultimate job is to love people, right? So even though it might seem like I'll belittle the idea that we could be facing abuse, I'm actually, what I want to do is flip that and make strength that actually you don't have to experience abuse, right? And so, is somebody overpowering me or taking advantage of me? Possibility. It is up to me to not participate in the triangle. Remember, the triangle is victim, perpetrator, rescuer. And as soon as I start speaking, hey, I'm not going to participate in that, and I can say that to myself and then know it, then I don't participate when those things happen. And if I'm not participating, I cannot be abused at that point in time. Will it be abusive? Yes. Am I being abused? No longer. No longer. And the more I say it out loud, hey, you may have talked to me like that, but that's not an okay thing with me, and I'm not going to participate in that scenario. And they might go in a little bit more. And at that point in time, I'm saying that's not something I'm going to participate in. Okay. Right. And so I just saw the comment. There's a second comment that came through, and I appreciate that clarification. Cool beans. So what the comment is that it's verbal contempt, resentment, and anger directed at me after the affair. And so and so that's the flip of it, right? Like, there's a whole different triangle that got created, um, that I think actually is another part of this scenario. So when we participate in abuse, so for instance, I'm the person who instigated an affair. If I'm that person who instigated the affair, that was part of the abusive scenario. At some point in time, we have to jump out of that game. So how do I be there for him when he? I see that. Right. So, and a lot of that is not trying to control other people, but just focusing on getting to a different place in your life. So this is the other thing that happens, Fit. As we start raising ourselves up to a different place, um, the game doesn't get to continue anymore. And that might be scary for certain people, but like, we get to a different place and our vision is creating a good relationship, then that gets heavy for somebody else and either puts them on board with us or it drops them off. Now that's scary, right? Because we don't want to lose people. Maybe if we made the initial mistake, we don't want that to happen. We don't want to be the cause of that. But it's time for us to start moving forward and being focused on what we're doing as people instead of staying in the problem. Right. And that again is how, like, resentment is built, is we stay in the problem because either we feel guilty about it, or somehow we, whatever has happened to us, um, makes us think that it's not a good scenario for us to do something different. But I think that the focus is, and this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, the focus has to be long term, not on what has happened. Okay. So I'm excited about the opportunity. Hurt gets hurt. So when somebody hurts somebody else, they feel hurt. And when they feel hurt, they're going to try to do hurt. We have to stop the cycle of that. So we don't interact with you want to interact less with things that are behaviors presenting and interact more with what's underlying. So if somebody was telling me, because Cool Beans put another comment inside the deal. So if somebody was to say some things that were hurtful, it's like, look, I get that you're hurt, without trying to spew back at them, right? Like, I get that there's a hurtful situation for you, but that's not what I want to participate in. I want to grow our relationship, right? And I think the more we stay on that track, that doesn't control anybody else. I don't know what the partner is or where they're at, if they're working on themselves and really trying to do the things. I don't know that part. But what I do know is that we still have a role to try to get better ourselves. Okay. The answer is not in solving um, making our relationship work? And this is scary for a lot of people. I'm gonna say it anyways. The answer is in getting better so that we can have a better relationship. It's not the flip. You can't say, like, what do I need to do to make my relationship work? Or you can't say, what do I need to do to make my person love me? That's not the answer. It's not the question. The question is, what do I need to do to create good relationships? What do I need to become? Because that's ultimately it. In order for us to actually do things that are good in our relationship and have a good relationship, we have to become the person first. So all the things that are coming to us require us to become more of what it is that we need to be. And these things that we've laid out today help us become more. Okay. And I hope that at some rate, Cool Beans, if that's helpful for you. I love that you're able to get on and ask questions. And I would also invite you to our monthly meetup where we can talk more specifically about what's going on. Okay.
Definitely.
All
Yeah, I
right.
mean, when you want to, I mean, we could stay on this topic, but we can move on with the show because this one right here hits.
Mhm.
Because you want to talk about abuse, I mean, in relationships, that is a long, deep conversation we can have about that,
Yeah.
too. But I mean, a lot of the times it's, not even in this particular situation here, but
Mhm.
just so many times we continue to be in these relationships and getting treated this way. And we have
Mhm.
to ask ourselves, well, it's not about, why are they treating me this way or, why am I staying? But what is it that I'm getting that I know I don't want, but may feel normal to me?
Yeah.
Because, right? Because you know what I'm talking about. Oftentimes, the reason why they continue to stay in that relationship is because they develop this dark association of what love is.
Mhm.
A lot of the times by how our parents treated us or what happened when we were younger,
Yeah.
and or what we seen in our parents relationship. We could see the, hey, you don't really care for me if you don't mistreat me, because that's what love means. That's what it means when you truly love somebody. You really care about them, all right, and so you get really emotional, and that lets me know that you really love me.
Mm.
But and this is what happens too when people get out of toxic relationships. They're so used to being in them and they meet somebody who treats them very good, very
Mhm.
well, but
Mhm.
they can't connect with them. There's something missing.
Mhm.
There's no
Yeah.
toxicity. That's what's missing.
Mm.
And then they feel like, well, I can't feel more for you because that's not there. So, and that person may not even realize that. A lot of the
Yeah.
times they don't, but that
Yeah.
can be what's going on, with the abuse. It's, why are we continuing to go back to it? Is another thing. That's
Yeah.
a yeah.
I want to go back because I talked about the leaving aspect and I didn't really give the why behind that. So I know the why in my mind, but I think it's useful to share. Um, so the reason I say that everybody has an out is because when we feel powerless, if you think about like anybody who's backed up into a corner, your fight's different. Like you're gonna have a harder time making a relationship work whenever you believe you cannot leave. Right? When you believe that you cannot leave and you're backed into a corner, that's a different kind of fight. Now, when you believe that you want to make your relationship work and you're fully committed to it, that's totally different than believing you cannot leave. And so, I don't, for everybody, that's going to be different. But I think that's a really important thing for us to share and love on everybody who's listening about that concept of like leaving as an option. It's two different things to be powerless and feeling like, man, I cannot leave, right? Like that I can't leave. I'm forced into this situation. Um, Versus, hey, I'm really committed to my relationship and I'm going to make it work. Right. That's
Yeah.
the two different feelings that will land in two different spots. I promise everybody. Like it's going to change everything. And I know it seems like, whenever you get hit a home run in a baseball, the bat's only this thick, Fit. It's only this thick. That's how thick it is. And the baseball is about this big, this big. So the distance on where that baseball comes off is small between if I hit it right here, it's going to be a single. And if I hit it right here, it's going to be a home run. Right. And what I'm
Yeah.
saying is the semantics on what I just described to you guys, like the difference between feeling like I cannot leave versus I'm fully committed to this relationship. We're going to make things work. the distance on that is small, but the outcomes of it is huge. So I want to clarify, that concept for everybody is like, just know that there's some more intention behind me saying like, hey, leaving is an option, right? Like it actually gives you power in the relationship that you're in right now. Okay. All right. Let's hit that red flag or real talk. You ready for it?
Always,
All right.
always ready for it.
I'm
And
gonna give
wait
you
for it.
the All right, so here's a scenario. Here goes a scenario. Your partner forgets to text you back one day. Is that a red flag or a real talk?
How do you no, uh, so that's again, we could argue both. Which one do you want me how about this? Which one do you want me to argue? Which side do you want me to argue? Because I could
I'm,
argue both.
I'm gonna tell you this, like from my point of view. Remember, I talked about me having resentment. Um, I actually grew that resentment myself. Like I remember somebody I was in a relationship with, um, not texting me back for the first time ever, like on a whole day, and they were
Uh-huh.
busy. And that to this, I'm even able to tell the story now. To this point, you like that really stuck with me, right? And I let that thing grow into ultimately not even being with that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're asking me, based on my experience, the idea that, and I'll go from this perspective, the idea that you care about that is probably a red flag. The
Mm,
idea that your partner does it might just be real talk.
yeah.
Where are you going with?
I mean,
Both, right?
it's circumstantial.
Yep.
Circumstantial. So, at what point is it like I forgot to text you? Like, you're on a important business trip. You get to the airport, and right there when you land, you got to check in, and you're I don't know, and
Yeah.
then your spouse told you, hey, call me right when you get there, and then whatever it is, and then you end up calling them right when you get back to the hotel. I don't know,
Mhm.
right? Situations like that,
But what if
right?
you go
Is
the
that
whole
a
what if the one day, a whole day passes? You think that's all right?
No. It's a you have a so a relate being in a relationship is take a certain amount of responsibility. So at that point, you have an obligation to let your partner know what's going on,
Mhm.
especially since you guys have built a rapport or a routine at that point.
Right.
That's what consistency what builds stability.
Mhm.
So the consistency of that communication, and when that consistency is broken, then all of a sudden the trust takes a little it
Yeah.
gets hit. You get some impact, a little damage to the trust there. It doesn't break it, but then over time, much like the resentment builds over time, then you know
Yeah.
what happens after that.
Yeah, for the person who didn't text back, I might start pulling the red flag out just to let them know like it's getting close. Like now the more I think about it, like why didn't you text? Why didn't you text one day? You know what I mean?
It's still bothering you, isn't
It's
it?
still bothering me. It's still bothering me. Luckily, my wife texts me every day, and or we get home together, and then it works out
Uh,
perfect. So they never ask how your day was. What about that one? I'll go first on it because I went. Oh no, I actually ended up going first on the last one. So I'll give you this one. They never
you
ask you.
always do. I just never say anything. I'm just kidding.
They never ask how your day was.
Yeah, it's a red flag, I think.
Okay.
But it could also be argued the other way, right? So,
Why
but
do you
let's
say
say
red flag? Yeah.
because for people who are avoidant, it's not that
Mhm.
they don't care about how your day was, right? It's that maybe they know that when that conversation starts, it's going to start something. There's a can
Yeah.
of worms with that conversation, and that person is not good at talking about feelings. And
Mm.
so they might ask how their day was in a different way,
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
or get that information in a different way. So it may not necessarily be a bad thing,
Mhm.
but if that person, is communicates and they ask other people how their day is going and
Yeah.
how they're feeling, and they don't ask their partner, that's a little unusual.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I might agree with that. I'm gonna agree with you on that one. You stop
Yeah.
bringing up issues because they don't listen anyways. And so for me, I think that that just takes some real talk. Like maybe you're not talking to your partner about that, but maybe you need to talk to somebody about it, whether it's me or Fit, or anybody else you have in your circle that can help guide you. Because if your take is, and this goes back to that concept of like building resentment, if your take is that I'm doing something based on what somebody else is doing, then you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. If you're doing things based on what somebody else is doing, you're going to suffer. You have to be who it is that you know you're supposed to be and battle for that. So if you're looking at somebody and you're saying, look, I'm going to stop bringing up issues because they don't listen anyway. It's such a short-sighted vision that it's not going to take you to where you want to be. So the vision actually should say different. That the conversation, this is why I think it's a real talk scenario, is like the conversation needs to switch to, what do I need to do to grow my relationship? That's the question. Like, it's not, how do I justify what it is I'm doing with what they're doing? All right, that's so backwards. And so you just need to have a real conversation about what's going on with yourself with somebody who can lead you into the right spaces. Okay. And the result cannot be, and so I'll tell you guys this, you're getting bad advice if somebody tells you, well, if they don't listen anyways, then you need to have a sit down talk with them and you guys need to turn off the radio and make sure that they're listening, make eye contact. If somebody gives you all of that information, wrong way, wrong way. Remember, it's becoming that's the first set of things. So the becoming says, I have to be what I need to be inside of my life, then in the relationship, in order for us to be able to get to a spot where we can have communication that serves both of us and is useful and is growing us, right? Where we can have arguments that we can bounce back from. I need to get to that spot myself. Okay.
Mm.
So yeah, I would go real talk on that. What do you think?
Um, the scenario of which one were we on?
You stop bringing up issues.
I was in active listening. I was all into
You
that one. I was like, yeah, man.
I saw
I
you like,
forgot.
you talking good. You talking good.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
stop bringing up issues because they don't listen
Oh,
anyway.
yeah. So that is an interpretation,
Mhm.
and a justification, and that's going to put a nail in the coffin.
Yeah,
That's it. That's abandonment of your relationship, or abandonment. That's what we do. Hey, you don't care about me. That's what screw it means when they're F it. I don't
yeah,
care anymore. So it's abandonment, abandoning the communication. But if you're going to give up on the talking about your problems with your partner, you might as well give up on the relationship
yeah,
because and so it is going to take some real talk, yes, but you're absolutely right. It's going to take some real development. It's going to take some becoming of
yeah,
that person. And you don't fake it till you make it. You be it until you become it. So you get a clear outline, that identity crystal clear of who and how you need to become. And you begin acquiring the skills or the tools or the mindsets, the practices to become that person. It's
mhm,
not like when you go to the gym, like you go once and then right then and there you go over time and that consistency. And that's when that growth occurs. But what's the hardest part about getting to about the gym is getting to the gym.
mhm.
But again, if we just get ourselves there and over time we continue to grow, then we will become that person who, who can work together and make that relationship, it has all the potential to be.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So last one, you quietly track all their mistakes instead of speaking up.
Yeah. That's a it's a red it's real talk. So let's go on the real talk side of it.
Okay.
Um, so remember, the relationship you have with your partner is a lot of the times the relationship you have with yourself. So again, questioning yourself, and why am I tallying all of this up? Where did I, like you like to ask, where did I learn this from? What is the
Mhm,
purpose of this? Where does this lead me? Is this action going to get me to my ideal outcome?
mhm,
And if it and but then even question, what is my ideal outcome? Is that a righteous outcome? Or is my outcome really truly to punish my partner, like you were saying, right? Yeah, and so even questioning yourself, the relationship that you have with yourself, am I tallying all of this up against my partner like the same way I'm tallying all of these other things against myself? Am I being resentful of my partner like like I'm still resentful of my dad, my mom, or you know? So then the questioning aspect, going in and reflecting in, it's why. What does it really boil down to? It's peeling those layers like an onion. I mean, I don't know who peels the layers of an onion, so to speak, but you get what I'm talking here.
Get to the potent part, right? Yeah, I do think, and again, going back to my scenario, I think that every time we track a mistake, and don't necessarily bring it up, or we bring it up in a blamey way, I think both of those things cause us to like put on a layer of cement over our heart. And that's actually what ends up happening is your heart ends up being covered in cement. So you can't love with it and you can't receive love. Nothing in, nothing out, right? And that's where we feel those disconnection points. And so I'm really afraid of that based on my own experiences is like, man, you need to put everything in check in your mind as far as like, should this be a blaming scenario or do I need to have a conversation? Right. And I think the more that we do that, then we're going to be in an okay spot, no matter whether it's a red flag or not. All right, so let's give them a weekly reset so that they can actually move on something, some tangible ideas for what needs to happen with resentment. So you want to do steps 1 and 3 for me, Fit?
All right. So the first one is write down one unspoken need. And that is a great idea because a lot of the times saying it can be uncomfortable. So writing it, it's like you're, like I like to describe, getting back into the water, getting in slowly. If that helps you, writing it, or even, if texting it works better, or however you deliver that message. But as long as you deliver that message, and yeah, maybe don't jump in the water, but get yourself in there step by step.
Yeah. So the second part it would be being able to practice saying it differently. So a lot of times we say things in ways that are blaming, and that actually increases the resentment because we believe that somebody else is causing us something versus the truth of the matter. So here's the truth of the matter: is there's not something outside of us that we don't put an interpretation on. So every interaction goes like this. The thing happens outside of us. Somehow I put a lens or I see it through my own lens, but whether it's my experiences, whether it's my definitions, however it is, I see it through my own lens and then I get a feeling because of it. Right now, that's important for us to understand because when we blame, we take away the whole process for ourselves. So what that looks like in real life is like, man, this person keeps calling me names, and I feel bad because they're calling me names. That's not true. Because if that person calling you names made somebody feel bad, it would have to make everybody feel bad. And that's not what's happening. Instead, it makes you feel bad. And why does it make you feel bad? That's because of the interpretation experiences that you've had. Now, that's not a blame to yourself. It's an advantage to yourself to understand that. Right. So when it comes time to being able to say it differently and not blame on somebody, you have to understand that process. The event happens outside of you. You put some interpretation on it and then you get the feeling. So now this gives us a way to be able to say things differently. So now somebody does something that I can sense like, man, that was hurtful. And now the conversation turns to, look, this is not your responsibility, but I need to say this out loud if our relationship is going to grow. Every time you do that or interact that way, I notice something go on in my body that makes me want to just shut down. And if I do that, that won't be good for our relationship. So I'm expressing out loud so I can do my work. This is not your responsibility to change. There could be things that you could change if you want to, but I'm not putting this on you. You're my partner. I just want to be closer to you and let you know what goes on for me. And that kind of conversation switches everything because I didn't go, you did this and now I feel this way. And every time you do this, I feel that makes me feel this way. And I'm stuck in that scenario. I just switched it to like, this is my responsibility. And I'm not playing about that. Like, I have a real responsibility to not be affected by your hurt. I have a real responsibility to love you no matter how bad you're hurting. And I'm going with that. And so the more that we are doing or being able to practice saying things in a non-blamey way, in a way that seeks to build a good relationship, then it gives us a different kind of way of being even when the things get hot. But you must practice before it gets hot, right? So that's the second one, is to be able to really practice saying the things without blaming.
We have number 3,
Mhm.
commit to addressing hurts within 24 hours. Or no, yeah, within 24 hours instead of letting them build. Commit to addressing hurts within 24 hours instead of letting them build. That's oftentimes we tell ourselves that I need time to process. I
Mhm.
need time to think. I just need my time,
Yeah.
but then when that time is up, are we having that conversation?
Yeah.
Right. So we what we do is we give ourselves some space. We argue with our partner. We go our separate ways. Later on, we meet up again. We're no longer angry. We're no longer upset. We are distracted with other things. Hey, what do you want to eat? What do you want to watch? Hey, we got to do this. Let's go do that. And then we're not mad at each other anymore. We're getting along again. So
Mhm.
I guess that we're not fighting anymore. So we don't need to talk about anything.
Mhm.
So making sure, even though, here's the thing, making sure, even though you guys are good again, not arguing anymore, you got not upset anymore, still have the conversation
Yeah.
within that, as soon as you can. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I like that as soon as you can. I wouldn't be hard up on the 24-hour rule myself. I think that everybody does take some time to process at different times. Some people are ready to go right now, other people are not ready to go right now, and I don't think we need to force that, or it needs to be a certain timeline. We do want to
yeah,
say it as soon as possible. And the other part that I would go about that is that the issue is not the time that's happening. The issue is if you're punishing with the time that's happening. So if I'm
yeah,
legitimately saying, look, I'm really trying to figure out what clicked in me, and I want to grow our relationship, but I don't have it right now. I don't have the energy, maybe I don't have the knowledge yet, but we are coming back to this conversation, right? The more that we can do that, we're going to be in an okay place. It doesn't matter if it takes 30 days or 3 minutes. But if you're like, nope, silent treatment, I'm disgusted with you. I can't talk to you right now. You don't deserve my conversation, right? That is a different setup. That's something that's going to build the resentment scenario, right? Or if we just let the time pass and we're saying, I'm not talking to them, and then we just get over it by happenstance, the resentment is building in there. And that's been our conversation all day, is we're trying to actually stop ourselves from getting to that resentment. So those to me would be in your guys' reset this week, is one is to be able to write down what's going on, at least one unspoken situation. And then the second one is for you to be able to figure out how to do it in a non-blaming way. Luckily, you can rewind the tapes. For anybody who's 40 and older, you probably understand rewinding the tapes, and then commit to addressing whatever is hurtful to you as soon as you can get to it with the intention of building your relationship. Okay. So those are the things I think will really help you guys. And we always want to invite you guys to joining us weekly. That's number one, so that you can get this juice, right? But then the second thing is also join us monthly in our private meetup session. Okay. We actually gave everybody a gift who trusted us this first week, of free joining, and we'll discuss whether or not we keep that open. But either way, the goal is to join as soon as possible. We are going to leave you with the word of the week. That you want to do our word of the week?
it's voice. It's voice.
Most.
Word of the week is voice.
Mhm.
Exercise your voice. Speak up. Choosing to speak up rather than stay silent. The reflection. Oh yeah. So the reflection is, we're going to share. how voices changes, using your voice changes relationships. So think about that. This is what I say about people with marriages. Oftentimes we forget that it's a relationship still, even though you get married. And relationship, meaning in which how you relate to your partner, relate, communicate, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that creates everything and can change everything.
Yeah.
That's what creates the relationship. If two people met and they couldn't speak or communicate to get to know each other, how can we really, create that relationship if there is no relating,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. It's such an important thing. It reminds me of like the beginning of the Bible where God actually talks things. Like, it doesn't even say that he used his hands to move everything, you know. Instead, it actually says that, you know, he kind of called those things. He said it, right? And which gives us a huge clue for the intention that our voice is supposed to um, be able to have, you know, the ability that our voice is supposed to be able to have. Huge clue for that. When we talk about like psychological aspects of what's going on in the Bible, like if we could look into that and see, like, why did he do that? Why did he show that? Why did he put that in there? You know, and I think it's a clue for how much our voice is really useful and important. And if we can be intentional about it, we can use it to destroy, but we can also use it to build. And oftentimes we accidentally use it to destroy. But if we get intentional, combining with our vision that we have for a relationship, we can really start to form things in our life that we want to be a part of. Right. So can we do that? Are we willing to do that is the question. And your voice is the key term that if you can just keep that in mind for this week, that, man, what do I need to be doing? Voice, here it is. I got to be able to say it. Now, can I manipulate other people with it? That's not the goal. You're actually building inside out, because the method is become, do, and then have the relationship that you want, right? And so in order for us to start out, we have to actually use our voice to build on who we're becoming. And the more that and you guys can again go back and look at the conversation that you can have with yourself and with your partner about how you want to rewire things. But the goal is to be able to speak it out, right? And so use your voice as much as possible. Okay. All right, you guys, man, we appreciate you joining us for this Friday morning. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll catch you guys on the flip side of things. Next week, actually, we'll be back on Friday again, Friday morning. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye, guys.